Hi guys, hope you're doing well. If you hear wind, it's because I'm outside. If you hear bell in the background, it's because a neighborhood cat, I just fed him. I've bribed him with food and he's rolling around behind me in the sun very happily after being fed. I often get asked, and in the last week I passed my 300th Pageant Project interview. And so, that's somewhat of a milestone, obviously. So I've done a few interviews in my time. One of the things I often get asked is, can I tell when someone's going to win? Like, after I've interviewed a pageant contestant, can I tell, yeah, she's definitely going to win? And no, I can't, because you can't, like, pageant judging is so unpredictable. And that's a politically correct word sometimes. Sometimes it's a lot worse than unpredictable. But pageant judging being so subjective means just because I think someone ticks all the boxes doesn't mean that they're the right fit or that they're even the best fit. I mean, especially if I haven't interviewed everyone in the pageant. There's no way, I might think someone's a great title holder, but maybe someone else that I haven't interviewed would be even better. So no, I can't tell after I've interviewed whether someone's going to win or not. What I can tell after having done so many interviews is when I feel that a young woman is going to go far, regardless of whether she wins a title or not. And when I say go far, I mean in her career, in her relationships. You know that she's going to achieve whatever she puts her mind to, whether it's in pageantry or not. And I was thinking, okay, what are the things that contribute to that feeling that I get? It's like what they call modeling or acting, the it factor with celebrities. So if you think of someone like, I don't know, a Marilyn Monroe or an Elvis Presley, like what set them apart? What gave them that superstardom character? They weren't just another actress or another singer. They become legends. Everyone knows who they are. And I was thinking, okay, in pageantry, what is it that gives someone that extra edge? And again, regardless of whether they win the title or not, they're going to do very well. And I will say very often they do go on to win the title, but that's really not the point. And so I broke it down into 5, and if you're watching me, I'm just got the 5 qualities down here on my laptop. And these are by no means an exhaustive list, but I've got 5 qualities. I didn't want to make it 50 qualities because then it's like, well, really? Have I really thought through that many hoops? I don't think I have, but I think 5 is a good number to start with. Number 1 is presence. Number 2 is poise. That's one that gets thrown around a lot in pageantry. Self-awareness, number 3. That's a huge one. Number 4, authenticity. Another one we talk about a lot when it comes to pageants. And then number 5 is relatability. So let's go through these one at a time. And again, I apologize that I'm looking down, but I need to stay on topic on this one. All right. So bear with me. Number 1. Okay, so presence. I was talking to a friend of mine who was competing in Miss Earth USA, and for that year, Marissa Page Butler, now Marissa Page Ford, was competing. She did in fact go on to win the Miss Earth USA title when she competed at Miss Earth International and came first runner-up, so she did very well. But she said when Marissa walked in the room that she could just feel it. Like there was a shift in the energy in the room. All eyes sort of turned. It's like you didn't even know she was there, but you knew she was there. And I think that quality of having a presence, it's how you make sure that you're not forgettable or that you're not boring. I think the worst thing in pageantry, and probably in a lot of things in life in general, is if you walk in a room and no one knows you're there, or you're very forgettable. And I don't say that to be crass or to be mean, but in this day and age, even if you don't want to be in social media, you don't want to be a celebrity, even if you're just working, I'll say in inverted commas, but even if you're working a 9 to 5 where you don't use social media, you don't want to be passed up for promotions. You don't want to be ignored in the office. You don't want to be the person that no one notices is missing. And the opposite of that is having some sort of presence. So when you walk in a room, regardless of where it is, people notice you. And there's various ways of achieving that. Very often pageant girls, physically very attractive, have very good posture, and that is part of it. But there's also a sort of magnetism to their charisma, and there's almost like a gravity, like a gravitational field around them that just pulls everyone to them. And you'll see it, especially if you guys are competing, because we're going to pageant season at the moment, at least in the US. And you'll just know that when you're in a room full of pageant girls, there are always one or two that just seem to stand out, and you're not exactly sure why. Like maybe you haven't spoken to them, you don't know them, but you know, hey, this one's just different. And very often what you'll see in the room, which is quite interesting, you'll literally see that magnetism because people are gathered around her. Now, of course, it could be because she was a title holder previous year, or she's very famous, or whatever it is. But I think that presence a lot of the time comes first, even if you don't know the person, even if they haven't won the title. There are a few people who just, for whatever reason, stand out just by being there in the room. And obviously when a few people notice her, or a few people notice him, it kind of builds and builds. So people go, oh, why are there so many people over there? And then more people will crowd around, then more people will crowd around. And again, this is not to say that you have to be the loudest, or you have to be the most attractive, or you have to be the tallest, or you have to wear the weirdest clothes. Those are all part of it. They will all contribute, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to your personality, because I think we've all met people who on the outside look very attractive, and then as soon as they open their mouth, you go, oh no, another one. And you quickly lose interest, whether as an interviewer or, whether you're on the dating scene, whatever it is, right? So presence is number one, and I think that's a really big one. Again, walk in a room, eyes turn, and you really want that. If you're looking, this is not a necessary factor for a title holder. I'm talking about the qualities that I think give someone the it factor. So it's a very different discussion. Someone with the it factor may not become a title holder, and not every title holder has the it factor either. And those two shouldn't necessarily equate. But we're talking about that sort of undefinable extra edge. Poise, number two. People in pageantry, it seems to be particularly in the Philippines, they talk about poise a lot. In fact, I think in Miss Earth they actually got us to judge people on poise. And I always thought that was a bit odd, because I don't think they really knew what it meant. It's a word and you hear it and go, yeah, that sounds good. Obviously, I want my title holder to be poised. We all want to be poised. But what does it actually mean, at least in pageant terms? And I thought about it, and the best way I can break it down is it's grace under pressure. So what it means is I could throw you in any situation, no matter how stressful it is, and I know you're not going to behave like a lunatic. You're not going to react like a lunatic. If someone leaves a troll comment on your social media, you're not going to jump down their throat and start, berating them on social media. And I've seen people do that. And that's what I think poise means. It's no matter how hard or stressful the situation gets, you're human. You're going to have bad days, but you're not going to overreact. I can rely on you to be diplomatic, even in the hardest times. And obviously, behind the scenes, you have your people, and when you need to rant, you go and rant to them. The cat's playing. He's having a good time. But for me, at least in pageantry, that's what I mean. Someone who is very even-keeled. Not to say they're boring. I've already said you don't want to be boring. But they're not going to be that level of unpredictable, very rash. You don't know what they're going to say next. I think in pageantry, you want someone who can walk into any room and compose themselves, present themselves very well, regardless of the situation. Whether it's friendly or sometimes hostile, and especially in this day and age where we're so divided in general that no matter what room you walk in, you could probably lose half of the room immediately just by saying one thing. So I think having that poise to sort of navigate in this day and age is hugely important. So that's number two. Number three is self-awareness. I don't think I need to tell you what self-awareness is, but maybe I just need to remind you of how important it is. I cannot tell you how many times I see a lack of self-awareness in pageantry, and it is very, very cringeworthy. Now, you need to balance this against not being too humble as well. There are a lot of people who've achieved a lot and won't ever talk about it because they're afraid that they'll be perceived as bragging. So that's on the other end of the spectrum. But then I've seen a lot of girls who over-exaggerate, use hyperbole, and are really purporting themselves to be bigger and better than what their achievements would really suggest. It's almost, think of it like marketing. I could tell you, for example, I'm an entrepreneur. And very often what that means is I'm unemployed. And do you see what I mean? It's like this, you need to know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and more specifically, you want to have a very good feeling for how you're being perceived in the room. Depending on the room you go in, whether it's virtual or real, depending on the person you're in front of, not everyone is going to react the same. In fact, it's probably fair to say that every situation you're going to walk into is going to be different in some way. And the people who can perform the best, or who can not fit in the best, but the people who can handle themselves best. Remember we talked about Poise. The people who can go into any room and can handle pretty much any situation. One of the ways that one of the things that's critical to being able to handle a situation is having that self-awareness. Like, how am I being perceived? Is what I'm saying going over well? Is it not going over well? And also when you're talking with someone, whether you have that rapport with someone, you need to be able to tell whether you have certain things in common, whether you should be speaking about certain things more, speaking about certain things less. And it's almost like a sixth sense of navigating in a social context, like when you're talking to someone, because you can't just always say the same thing. This is very often the case when you let's have a pageant coach, an interview coach, and if you've memorized an answer, which I don't recommend, by the way. It's an okay intermediate step, but it's certainly not the end goal. But I'm a big proponent of, when you go into an interview room, you want to be able to have practiced so much that you can be flexible. And so you're using the self-awareness to go, okay, this room is tending more towards a certain way. Or that person who's asked me the question, I can tell from their body language, or maybe even what they're wearing, or the way they are shifting as I'm saying certain things, I can tell what they're interested in, and maybe what I can talk about and what I shouldn't talk about. So self-awareness really comes down to a lot of, yes, you know your strengths and weaknesses, but you also want a very good understanding of how people around you are perceiving you, because regardless of strengths and weaknesses, sometimes people get along and certain people don't get along. And I think you really want that self-awareness so that you can get in front of that and ride that wave. It really relates to the presence, and not so much the presence maybe, but certainly the poise. I don't think you can be poised if you don't have self-awareness. And this also comes down to the whole cliche advice of be yourself. And you can't be yourself until you know yourself. Like, what does be yourself mean? And frankly, that's such bad advice, because none of us are the same person in different social contexts. Like, I'll be different in front of my best friend than I would be with my family, than I would be with my partner, than I would be just on the street as a stranger, than I would be at a pageant. You walk up, you want a photo. I'm not going to be the same person in every social context. So be yourself. Well, that's really not great advice. You need to know yourself first, which is another word for self-awareness. I know I've spoken quite a lot about that one, but that's really important, and it's also very undervalued, because everyone just says be yourself. What does that mean? Everyone thinks be yourself is such great advice. It's really not. You need to know yourself first, and then it's not about being yourself. It's about presenting the version of yourself that you think will best fit the current situation that you're in. And that's not to say you're being inauthentic. We're going to go into authenticity. That's important as well. But none of us is just one thing, right? Be yourself. What does be yourself mean? So self-awareness. Let's move on. Number 4, authenticity. Again, this is one that's spoken about so much in pageantry, but people rarely give it any thought. It's like, it sounds good. Like, be authentic. Don't be inauthentic because no one likes it. Sure. And the problem you see, again, this comes down to self-awareness. People think that, let me give you an example. I know this is you. I don't mean I'm not throwing any shade at you, but you sometimes will see this genetically blessed, perfect looking specimen, very often in pageantry or modeling. And then they will post a selfie or post a professional photo that has no makeup or very minimal makeup. And then they will go on about how much courage it took. I saw this the other day, so I'm thinking about it. How much courage it took to post a photo where you had absolutely no makeup on. And I get where you're coming from, I do. But let's be real. You are in the genetic 1% of the best looking people on earth. I don't think it takes that much courage compared to some other things that you could be achieving in life, like fighting in a war, putting your life on the line, fighting a fire, saving lives as an EMT or as a doctor. It's like a model who's genetically blessed, posting a photo with no makeup is not really on that spectrum of most courageous thing ever done. And so that's not what I mean by, and people say, oh, she's so authentic. No. Authenticity really, at the end of the day, you'll know when you're doing it because there's no effort involved. And if you've not done it before, it will actually be really effing scary. Because so many pageant girls, so many celebrities, so many people in the public eye, when you spend all your time in the public eye, whether you want to or not, you sometimes become like a caricature of yourself. You become known for a certain thing, and so you keep acting the same way. And you'll know you haven't really been authentic when you get in front of your best friends and you are a completely different person. I mean, again, it's not to say that you should be the same person in every social context, but when you really, for example, you say things that you never would have said, you find yourself being free to express certain opinions. And I mean, again, in this day and age, that's part and parcel of it. You do have to be wary of what you say, and we want our title holders to be uniting, like bringing people together, not divisive. But if you've in your social media presence, because this is really what we're talking about, or in pageants, if you've never said anything that kind of scares you because it's so raw, it's so honest, it's so authentic. And by the way, when we say authentic, what we're really saying is you're showing a flaw. Like talking about how perfect you are, that's not being authentic. When we talk about being authentic, what you're saying is you want people, and we'll get to the relatability, but one of the ways you get people one of the ways you get to be relatable is by being authentic. And when they say that, it's like you are revealing a flaw. And that's not, okay, oh, my skin isn't perfect. I mean, yes, it can be, okay, cellulite, I got that. But what's really a lot scarier for most people is an inner flaw. So something that you're afraid of, or something that you struggled with personally, or a story that maybe you overcame, a story of resilience, something that maybe you're not so proud of in your life. That's really the authenticity, because the authenticity is showing that you're not perfect. That's what makes you relatable. And the only way to be relatable is by being imperfect. The only way to be imperfect is to be authentic. And that means you need to tell people that you need to show people that, hey, I don't wake up every morning at 6 a.m. or I don't wake up and everything's perfect. Or, hey, I don't achieve all my goals. I really set this as a goal for this year and I didn't manage to achieve it. You know, I did this, and it didn't work out. So if you're not someone who's used to being very authentic and honest, it will be scary. It will be very scary the first time. And I think that's how you know when you're really being authentic. I don't think it should be about the way you look. And again, I don't think that appearing without makeup is really on the same spectrum as having a deeply traumatic life experience that you've managed to overcome. I mean, to each their own, right? But as I said, if it's not scary, at least a little bit, then I don't think you're really leaning into the authenticity as much as you could. And there are people who are very authentic and they're very brave. And maybe you've done that already. That's just part and parcel of who you are. I know I get told a lot that people like my authenticity and honesty. And so I don't want to put myself up as an example, but if you compare the way that I speak and the things that I talk about compared to some other pageant people, maybe that'll give you some inkling as to authenticity. Another part of that is I'm very bad at BSing and lying. And if something is crazy, I'm going to say it's crazy. I don't like going along with crazy stuff when I know it's crazy stuff. And the final one, relatability. I think it's almost the opposite end of the spectrum to presence. Presence is you walk into the room and everyone looks at you and go, oh my God, she's that person. She's beautiful. She's intelligent, creative. And then if you lean too much into that, you're not relatable anymore, because people can't relate to being perfect, right? We've already talked about this with the authenticity. So being relatable whilst still having that presence is tricky, because you could be completely relatable and say, yeah, I spent all my time sitting on the couch eating Cheetos and I put on 20 pounds in the last 20 days. Yeah, we've all been there, especially during COVID, right? Most of us have been there. But then you're relatable, but you probably got no presence, right? You certainly don't have much poise or any of the other stuff. So being relatable, and again, it's funny how these are all sort of interlinking together as I'm speaking about them. But being relatable comes from that authenticity, which comes from leaning into your imperfections, which takes true courage. And the relatable is important because if you are just someone who is so, and I don't mean this in a dating sense, but you're just in general, you're so unattainable, you're so picture perfect, and people can't relate to you, then there's this element of distance that they go, okay, that's you, but that could never be me. And so you want a bit of a gap, frankly, because that's what presence is. Presence is you walk into a room and there's something different about you. So there is that gap. But if the gap becomes too big, then you're a mythical person. It's kind of like the way, I think a good example would be someone like Taylor Swift. Like, obviously Taylor Swift, regardless of, she said some political things, and regardless of what you think of her as a person, there's no denying she's famous. And when she walks on stage, she certainly has a stage presence as a performer, as a musician. Yet she is so relatable to so many young women. That's why wherever she went in the world, she sold out massive stadiums, and I don't know how much money she's made. But it's interesting because, right, when you think about how much money she's made, how many number one hits she's had, you'd think, oh, they can't relate to that at all. But in the music, in the lyrics, and in the way she generally presents herself, people still think she's relatable. I bet you can name a lot of people who've achieved less, at least in terms of financial success, than Taylor Swift, who just don't seem relatable at all. And so it's about having that presence. Obviously, she's a major celebrity, yet still being relatable. If you can have both, then I think that really is part of that it factor. Because otherwise, like, you go on an interview, and again, this is probably a good example. You see some Hollywood actors or actresses who go and have interviews, and they're just not relatable. They seem really, really out of touch. In fact, you see a lot of this when people comment about some political ideas, particularly the controversial ones, and you can just see that they're so out of touch. They're not relatable at all. Like, they're living, they're complaining about, for example, carbon footprints and things like that, and yet they're taking private jets to fly everywhere. It's like, I don't relate to that at all. You're completely out of touch. And wow, the cat really is having fun. Maybe that's a sign for me to wrap things up. So those are the 5 things that I kind of feel that the people who have that it factor, they have all of those 5 factors to at least some degree. Now, there could be more, they could be different, but I think whenever you're thinking about something like this, because you're probably going, okay, how can I have that it factor so that I can do better at pageants and maybe do better in life, get more promotions, etc., etc., etc. You never want to make something like that super complicated, because then you won't do anything with it. And so I like to try and take something like this, which is frankly, like, it's a mythical, like, who knows what defines the it factor. But if you don't give it a go and try and define it, or if your definition, as I said earlier, is like 50 things, you can't walk into a room and think about 50 things. You can maybe think about, the common wisdom was you can think about 3 to 7 things. at once, most people. I think in this day and age that number's gone down because our attention is always darting everywhere. Frankly, my favorite is 3 things. I think people can keep 3 things in their head because we're trained like, traffic lights are red, yellow, and green, or it's easy as A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, or it's yes, no, or maybe. I think brains can work with that. So maybe even if you want to take a stab at this and say, okay, what are the factors and what are the qualities that you want to work on in yourself so you can have more of that it factor, which, by the way, will increase your chances of winning the title, because it's just something magical about you. So maybe you want to take a stab and go, what are the 3 things? And maybe you'll take some of mine. Like, I really think presence is a big one. You want to walk in a room and people just notice you. And again, it's not about just how you look. It's just something about your personality as well, the way you compose yourself, the way you present yourself. You want some sort of presence, right? I think you also want some relatability. You need to be relatable. You need to be authentic. So maybe you can roll some of those ones that I said, the 5 ones that I said, into maybe 3, and then go and work on those. And will it help your pageants? Yes, but it's about more than that. I mean, I could talk about being intelligent and articulate, and those are all important as well. But in terms of when I've interviewed someone and I've gone, wow, there's something different about that person, give it a go. What qualities, what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things would you say sets that person apart from someone else? Because there are other people who are very intelligent, articulate, and very good looking, but they don't seem to have that same factor. So maybe, I don't know, maybe humor for you is one, intelligence, creativity, whatever it is. Give it a go, because I think it's something that is good to keep in the back of your mind as you're working towards your pageant success and success in life. There are the very concrete things that we work on, like interview, like our runway skills, but then the more nebulous things of, well, what will give me that extra edge over my competition? I don't think that's something we talk about enough, and it's a bit difficult because it's not very straightforward. And frankly, it might be different for you and me. So give some thought to it, then work on a way to work on it, right? And then give it a go and see what happens, because it's not just about speaking well. It's not just about walking well. In life, if we're using pageantry as a stepping stone to other things that we can achieve, you want to give some thoughts to some of those other skills that you can internalize and represent.